Bill VanGorder is Chief Policy Officer and Chief Operating Officer at C.A.R.P, was the founding chair of the Nova Scotia chapter. He's also immediate past chair of the Nova Scotia Advisory Committee on Seniors Issues to the provincial government. Bill joins us now from Halifax to talk about the policy and advocacy work C.A.R.P is doing to create an infrastructure for living in place. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Marissa, thank you very much for inviting me today. The Zoomer C.A.R.P Living in Place Explained event webinar is certainly important to all of us in C.A.R.P. This has been a long-running issue for C.A.R.P, and we know that it has been for our viewers too. It was always clear that home care was preferred to institutional care. Rather than going into a long-term care facility, our C.A.R.P surveys show that well over 90% of us would rather stay in our own home or our own community for as long as possible. Modern-minded governments and policymakers know that staying in our own communities is a much better alternative, financially, socially, and medically. But the policy issues are: who pays for home care? How much does it cost? What's the role of governments or companies with benefit plans versus family-funded home care? C.A.R.P has always advocated for more direct government support for family-funded caregiving, better support for volunteer caregivers, and more public health dollars channeled to provide or subsidize in-home services. The COVID disaster in long-term care homes made it painfully clear that it's inadequate and effective in Canada's long-term care strategy. It has to be changed. Other countries with similar healthcare models allocate far more public health dollars to home and community care. Canada spends 87% on institutional care and only 13% on home and community care. OECD countries, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is most of the larger economies in the world, spend 65% on institutional care and 35%, compared to our 13%, on home and community care. In Denmark, for instance, they spend only 36% on institutional care and 64% on home and community care. In addition to these statistics, there are other factors that impact the necessity of increased, better quality home and community care. Our increased longevity, average life expectations are increasing a full additional year every decade. Today, we have more and better home solutions, and the collapse of institutional care models, even without COVID, has been evident. There are three new forces that make the entire subject more urgent, more complex, and more fast-changing. It's no longer enough to demand more government money for the same old structure. Now C.A.R.P is acting on a wider range of fronts. We're, of course, keeping the pressure on governments for reform, but also we're going to carry out new initiatives to better inform our members of news, trends, resources, technologies, and strategies. And these three forces really need more detail. Do you know that the fastest growing age group in percent terms are centenarians? In 1950, there weren't even 1,000 people 100 years older or older in Canada. In fact, it didn't hit 1,000 until 1975. By the year 2000, the total had tripled to 3,000 centenarians, and by 2020, it was triple to 9,000. And by 2050, we're going to have 34,000 people by over 100 years old, 127,000 people. Within 15 years, more people will be turning 80 every year than being born. This will place completely unsupportable burden on our current long-term care system if it stays the way it is. There has to be change. We require and now have available better at-home solutions. That's the kind of thing that you're going to be hearing about today. There's home modification. It's becoming a massive industry. There's new technology, robots, artificial intelligence, mobile diagnostics, special appliances, and greater interconnectivity between mobile diagnostics and medical professionals. We've even got to get our mouths around these new words we're all learning. And telehealth is getting better too. COVID demonstrated what's possible, and the genie is certainly out of the bottle now on telehealth. The home care provider industry in Canada is now estimated to be worth $10 billion and is expected to be $22 billion by 2024. And there's a return to doctors making house calls. Humano in the USA, one of the largest health companies in the world, has invested $100 million in a startup aimed to provide at-home doctor services. And Canadian providers are springing up as well. The institutional model of old-fashioned long-term home care facilities, as we have known it, is collapsing. Neither government nor industry can create enough long-term care beds fast enough to cope with the demand. All other aspects of the healthcare system are being forced to look for more innovative, flexible, and lower-cost solutions. You know, there's a perfect match between aging in place and living in place. And that's why we're calling this webinar today, Living in Place Explained. The home-based model is going to be the solution. So all of this means that C.A.R.P's going to be expanding its role. Of course, we're advocating for better government policies, increased support of frontline home care, respite care, and day programs to better enable living in place, increased funding and use of technology-enabled home care, and expanded telehealth solutions to support patients and their families, and more support to family-funded caregiving. Did you know that unpaid family caregivers contribute an estimated $66 billion of care annually to the healthcare system? This is a tremendous money saver for government, but it brings about that we must ensure that all caregivers have access to financial relief, such as a family caregiver tax credit that can be either refundable or rebated. And through many of our platforms at C.A.R.P, including webinars like this, we plan to give our members the tools to navigate this rapidly changing new world. We're going to be providing our members with constantly updated information on new products, services, and systems, analytical and planning tools to help assess needs and find assistance, information about financial strategies and resources. And in most fields, knowledge is power. And that's going to be especially true in this case. And that's why we're pleased to be sponsoring webinars like this. And in the future, C.A.R.P will be doing even more. Webinars, podcasts, planning tools, expert advice, both nationally and at our local chapter levels. As I said in the beginning, you probably know this as aging in place. What we believe it should be about living well and enjoying life in the home and the community you love. And that's why we've created this Living in Place Explained virtual event. We know that you today will learn from our experts about the practical steps you can take now and tomorrow to enable you to live in place and develop your personal plan for the future. Thank you for watching.